emergency evacuations from Russia since
Okay.
that, in these 2 weeks.
Albert, I've been listening to two Russian reservists. They've been called up to serve, and they seem quite happy about being called up and being drafted. Let me play their comments first of all, and then I'd really like to hear why you decided you didn't want to fight for your country. Let's have a listen to the reservists.
It means it must be like this because President Putin has already answered this question. If he ordered mobilization, not a total but a partial one, it means everything is not that scary. It means he knows what he's doing. He's a clever person.
Full speed ahead for Mother Russia. This way there is no fear anymore.
Albert, so you served in the army, you were formerly in the army, but you decided you were going to leave Russia so you don't get drafted in again. Why?
Yes, after being brought to the army 10 years ago, and after all my negative experience in the Russian army, I became a political activist in the end of in the beginning of the 2012. And so, it is the experience of the army and the experience of the state violence that I suffered in army made me a political activist. And so in the 2022, my reaction as an anti-Putinist, as a left liberal, was obvious. And so if you consider the president as a dictator, you consider your state as a repressive state, repressive for the whole people. So the war that was launched by this state and by this president, you see it as a criminal war in which you don't want to take part.
I'm going to show the popularity ratings of President Putin as they've changed from August all the way through to September. I'm going to show this for you so that you can see it at home or wherever you're viewing from. So is the country going in the right direction? 67% yes, 60% not so much. This was after the draft was announced. Do you approve of Putin's activities as president? 83% yes in August, 77% not so much in September. These ratings are still high. Stanislav, why?
Well, first of all, we're speaking about a tiny percentage of the population who actually agree to answer these questions, and especially in these times, because to the best of my knowledge, it's about maybe only 2 in 10 persons, so about 20% just agree to answer. And of course, if they agree to answer, and they're, let's say, cognizant, or at least they're afraid that they can make a wrong, so to speak, answers. So the percentage of those who say that they support the current government or its actions, I mean, it gives us a somewhat distorted picture, of course, of reality. And at the same time, if we do not see too much protests nowadays, doesn't mean that people once again applaud what's going on. Because back in the day, I mean, let's face it, during this most of the period of this military operation, it was waged on the Russian side by the professionals. Maybe that's why it's called special military operation. So special guys did the job, right? And so many people who were basically opposed to this conflict, they still remained in Russia proper and didn't want to flee, because yes, they were against it, but still it did not affect their lives so much. But when this partial mobilization was announced, of course, they realized that now it's their problem and not the problem of military professionals. And at the same time, for some, it gave a picture that something may be going not according to the original plan, right? If you have to draft more people to the army, then, well, something is maybe something is changing in the general attitude the Russian authorities on how to wage this military operation and how to win it, if it's possible, of course.
I completely agree with Stanislav that, yes, it's very difficult to trust opinion polls, especially when you have such a repressive machine in the country, and the denial rate to answer questions about the attitude to the war or support to the Kremlin and Putin's regime in general is much higher than prior to this full-scale invasion. And but as I said, there are a lot of protests immediately. We see a lot of activity that people do on the ground. There are a lot of derailing trains or setting conscription centers on fire, and just a lot of ethnic minority groups appeared who started to inform their communities about this war and trying to explain how to terminate their contracts, how to avoid mobilization and things like that. We had never had such a vibrant ethnic minority community, because Russia is not only 11 time zone country, but it's also has over 190 ethnic minorities, and many of them are used as a cannon fodder by the Kremlin's regime and sent to Ukraine. The chance of being sent to Ukraine, if you are from the Republic of Buryatia, for example, is 4 times higher than if you are in any other Russian regions. The possibility to die in this war, for example, for a person from Buryatia is 9 times more, for a person from Tver is 10 times more, for a person from Chechnya is 3 times more. So all these regions suffer more, and people there are doing much more to try to save their communities. So we see a very vibrant activity in this field.
Earlier we spoke to Elena, and Elena is the director of the Nordic Ukraine Forum. She had a very particular point of view on the Russian men who decided that they would rather flee Russia than be drafted. This is what she told us earlier.
During the last month, there are thousands of people who live in Russia due to the mobilization inside the country. They should stay in Russia, and Europe should not open the borders, because these people have glorified the war in Ukraine. These people haven't protested when the genocide was going on in Bucha, in Irpin, and so on. The only thing that made them go to the streets and go to Europe was the fact that they will be killed in this war. Moreover, for Europe, it is a security issue, because these people have the imperial colonial consciousness, and tomorrow they will be asking to have their Russian vote where they are now. They are not victims. They are those who need to stop the war that their country has started.
Albert, we have a number of people online who are trying to work out what Putin's strategy is. And as a former member of the military, you might be able to help us out a little bit. One viewer says that Putin became overconfident because in Georgia things went his way, and then again in Crimea, and he thought he could do it a third time, again returning to Ukraine. Do you think that's the military strategy? You've managed to do it fairly quickly. We're not expecting anybody to be upset about this. We're moving, we're take over. Didn't work that way. What do you think, Albert?
All my military experience, my army experience had nothing to do with military, with the army. It was just about washing, and so it was not. It has nothing.
So, Albert,
to do with,
you have about as much military experience as the people in our YouTube comments section. So that's what they would suggest. so I would say you probably have more than they do.
I wasn't even allowed to take a rifle in my hand.
I hear you. I hear you. I want to move on to another thought here, Stanislav, and this is really about the economic impact of what this special military operation, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, is having on Russia. This is Yvonne. She spoke to us a little bit earlier.
There's been an ongoing debate as to whether Western sanctions have been doing enough to hurt the Russian economy. But with Putin's recent mobilization decree and illegal annexation of 4 Ukrainian territories, we've entered into a new phase of the war, where the Russian economy will be directed toward prioritizing wartime efforts, and the Russian workforce is facing, at minimum, a loss of hundreds of thousands of workers. This is occurring at the same time that global energy prices are falling. The EU is preparing to ban purchases of Russian oil, and the West is preparing new sanctions and an oil price cap against Russia. All of this will likely undermine consumer confidence and the long-term growth potential of the Russian economy.
I'm wondering, Stanislav, is the impact of sanctions, is that now impacting how Russians are feeling about war in Ukraine?
Well, first of all, just for the record, I completely disagree with the statement by the previous speaker, the Ukrainian female, who said that all Russians are responsible. So I think this view is cannibalistic, so it's unacceptable, I think. So, and to return to your question, well, generally speaking, of course, nowadays the prices are not skyrocketing, right? So, but a lot of people just tend to buy less and to save more because nowadays they cannot plan for the future. So their horizons of planning, so to speak, they shrunk from, let's say, a couple of years to a couple of weeks or a couple of days. That's the problem. Moreover, when I ask those who are supporting the special military operation, I ask a simple question. Do you realistically think that if we win this fight, the regular Russian people like us will live better and will be more secure than when we lived back prior to the 24th of February? Can you realistically say that this whole military operation will make us all more prosperous and more secure? And they are, let's say, they are very uneasy in answering this question. They say something like, well, we don't know, it remains to be seen, but nobody said that, of course, we will live more happily and will have more prosperity.
I want to bring one more voice into our conversation, and that is the voice of President Putin, who here is addressing government and suggesting that it's the West who's committing war and atrocities against Russia rather than Russia doing that in Ukraine. Let's have a look, let's have a listen.
Советского Союза нет.
I want to emphasize once again and precisely, in its greed and in the intention to maintain its unlimited power, there are real reasons for the hybrid war that the collective West is waging against Russia. They don't want freedom for us. They want to see us as a colony. They don't want equal cooperation, but robbery. They want to see us not as a free society, but as a crowd of soulless slaves for them. They see as a direct threat to them our thought and philosophy. Therefore, they encroach onto our philosophers. Our culture and art is a danger to them, and therefore they are trying to ban it. Our development and prosperity is also a threat to them. Competition is growing. They don't need Russia at all, but we need her.
So much going on online on our YouTube comment section. TG, there's no peace until Russians leave every inch of Ukrainian territory. Putin let the Russian people be drained of their wealth. And one more thought here. Russia will pay the bill for the crimes committed against Ukraine. And also, Russians are good people. It's the presidency that is the problem. So many thoughts going on here on our online conversation. But thank you, Stanislav, Natalia and Albert, for helping us explore what Russians are feeling about the Ukraine invasion at the moment. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time. Take care.
When the news breaks.
It's not just personal property, but also infrastructure that now needs fixing, from power lines to water mains.
When people need to be heard and the story told.
They would get punished if they spoke Ukrainian. I'm afraid I won't be able to return home.
With exclusive interviews and in-depth reports.
South African pangolins won't eat in captivity.
Al Jazeera has teams on the ground to bring you more award-winning documentaries and live news.
Brazil's presidential election is going to a second round on October 30th. Incumbent hardline President Jair Bolsonaro and former socialist President Lula da Silva are vying for votes. But which one will voters choose to re-elect to Brazil's highest office? Ongoing special coverage on Al Jazeera.
A diverse range of stories from across the globe, from the perspective of our network's journalists. On Al Jazeera.
A sense of belonging.
You walk down any street in Parkdale and you can feel the presence of the Tibetan community.
And the everyday heroes that keep communities together.
I believe I'm the best coach and I'm confident of myself.
Loga is always Loga. In a new 4-part series, Al Jazeera delves into unique communities, revealing how they're adapting to 21st century challenges. A sense of community, coming soon on Al Jazeera.
Indonesia, your investment destination, the world's 10th largest economy, is busy transforming, ready to be your business partner with a robust talent pool, politically and economically stable and strong policies. Being the powerhouse, Indonesia is confirmed by the G20 presidency, bringing opportunities for you. Invest Indonesia now.
This is Al Jazeera.
Hello, I'm Kerry Johnston. This is the News Hour live from Doha. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, fears of a global recession grow as the IMF paints a gloomy future for the world economy. Hours after pounding the Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia, Russia says Vladimir Putin could be open to meeting Joe Biden. The US president looks to re-evaluate relations with long-term ally Saudi Arabia after Riyadh led the OPEC Plus group of oil producers to cut production. Lebanon and Israel are set to sign a maritime border deal after years of negotiations. Plus,
it's not easy to wake up every day, go out on patrol. I'm doing this for him.
Rangers in South Africa risk their lives protecting rhinos as a tribute to a colleague killed by poachers.
Hello, I'm Sarah Khair, the latest sport, and with 40 days to go to the World Cup, it's another big week in the Champions League. But Lionel Messi misses PSG's match on Tuesday because of injury.
The International Monetary Fund is predicting a bleak future for the global economy as the war in Ukraine, sky-high consumer prices and rising interest rates take their toll. We'll be live at IMF headquarters with our correspondent Alan Fisher in just a moment. But first, let's hear from the chief economist of the International Monetary Fund. Well, we have some technical problems there, but we are going to go to our correspondent Alan Fisher, who joins us from Washington, D.C. Alan, can you paint a picture of just how bad this year has been?
There's no good news in the report if you go through it. There is no silver lining. And the reality is that so often we hear of the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank talking about how things are rough and there are difficult economic climates. We heard it 15 years ago during the financial crisis. We heard it during COVID as well. But this time it seems that almost everyone around the world is feeling it, and they're feeling it in ways that impact the way they do ordinary things, such as going to the food store. They find that goods aren't there, or even worse, they can't afford that they would normally buy. Or if they go to fill up their car with petrol, then they find out that it's much more expensive than it used to be. So the impacts are being felt almost everywhere. And there are a number of reasons for that. First of all, this political instability. We've seen that in the likes of Lebanon, where there is an issue with the banks and political instability has followed. Or if you go to Sri Lanka, where the protests against the president, and the country is already suffering under a huge debt burden, and that has caused problems as well. There have been climate crises, and you've seen that in places like Pakistan or here in the United States itself. And then there is the economic issue, which is affecting everywhere around the world. And then there is the war in Ukraine. Now, according to the International Monetary Fund, the prospect of growth has certainly been hit. And if you grow the economy, that should mean that there are more jobs, and that should mean that there is more money for ordinary people to enjoy. But they're saying, look, there is a real issue this year. So they're saying in 2021, growth globally was 6%. In 2022, you can see that everything is contracting. It's down to 3.2%. And next year, it will be 2.7%. So you can see that internationally, everything is contracting. And then there's inflation, and that seems to be impacting almost every single one of us. Inflation in 2021 was 4.7%. This year, it's 8.7%. And the International Monetary Fund is saying, while it will come down, it will stay high for a much longer period, to the extent that 2023 will feel for many countries like a recession. And the figure there will be 6.5% next year. So you can see that that's still way above the targets, which are normally at the most 1 or 2%. So 6.5 is a big jump in inflation. And a third of the countries across the world will feel a recession in the coming year. This is the first in-person gathering for 3 years at the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. They get together every year to talk about the problems that they face. This time there is a convergence